Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett. Let's start this packed Wednesday with the headlines. Ukraine says a diplomatic push aimed at averting a feared Russian invasion is working, but says the situation remains tense. Japan is offering Europe liquefied natural gas imports over fears supplies could be disrupted by a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. Pope Francis says war in Ukraine would be madness and hopes tensions can be overcome through multilateral dialogue. Belarusian cross-country skier and retired Olympian Sergei Dolidovich says his family fled to Poland after his daughter was barred from competing amid a crackdown on dissent. The busiest land crossing from the US to Canada remains shut as Canadian truckers block lanes to protest their government's pandemic control measures. And British superstar Adele wins 3 awards, including Album of the Year, at the Brit Awards, in a ceremony that did away with gender-specific categories for the first time.
A woman and being a female artist, I do. So much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The recipient of the Critics' Choice Award.
An Olympic athlete from Belarus has fled the country with her family after being barred from the Winter Games. 17-year-old cross-country skier Daria Dolidovich has been accused of supporting the country's political opposition. She is the daughter of cross-country skier Sergei Dolidovich, who's a 7-time Olympian. He recently took part in opposition street protests and spoke out against the leader Alexander Lukashenko. Daria and her family have fled to Poland.
Daria has been stripped of her right to do sports or take part in competitions. After the reply from Belarusian Ski Federation, I don't see the possibility of her continuing her career in Belarus. It all happened due to such made-up reasons. I see no chance for her to continue doing what she loves and make her dream come true.
I had planned to finish school in Belarus, but my parents said that we were moving. I think it's for the best for my father as well. I'm upset, of course. It would have been simpler to stay a few months and finish middle school. Here I don't know how to do it. We are only working on it.
She's one of the most promising junior cross-country skiers in Belarus. The Belarus Ski Union deactivated her FIS code at the International Ski Federation. That code allows athletes to compete in FIS competitions. Daria Dolidovich plans to pursue her studies in Poland and to continue her training. All of this comes a few days into the Winter Beijing Olympics, where the Belarusian national team is facing scrutiny over the defection of sprinter Kristina Simonovskaya at the Tokyo Games last year. Last week, the United States announced visa restrictions on several Belarusian nationals, citing extraterritorial counter-dissident activity. Another Belarusian cross-country skier was stripped of her license to participate in the Olympics over her political views. Several elite Belarusian athletes have been jailed or kicked off national teams for voicing opposition and joining protests. Next, we'll take you to Ukraine. The country is the focus of intensive diplomatic activity to try and head off a potential conflict. Our executive editor, Palki Sharma Upadhyay, is in its capital, Kiev, and she's bringing us ground reports, minute-to-minute updates and exclusive voices from there. She's visited a bomb shelter, which is being refurbished.
This is Ukraine, the site of Europe's biggest military build-up since the Second World War. The country is surrounded by Russian troops, both on land and in the Black Sea. The Americans say Russia has completed 70% troop deployment for a full-scale invasion. A former defense minister of Ukraine says Russia has enough troops in place to take Kiev. The capital of Ukraine is within striking distance of Russian soldiers stationed in Belarus. Su-35 fighter jets, S-400 missile defense systems, and thousands of Russian troops are on standby here, ready to strike when Moscow orders and hit the Ukrainian capital within minutes. How will Kiev defend itself from Russian bombs? By preparing bomb shelters. Not one or two, but thousands of them. We are in downtown Kiev, and this is a city of bomb shelters. A lot of these are Soviet-era relics from the time when Soviet and American nuclear weapons were trained at each other. A lot of these bomb shelters were built. Many of them have been upgraded. In fact, only last month, the Kiev City Council issued an interactive map that shows how many shelters there are, and it guides the citizens of Kiev to the nearest bomb shelter in the event of an invasion. Let me show it to you on the map. This is what it looks like. This is the city of Kiev, and all these colorful dots that you see, these are bomb shelters with the varying degrees of preparedness and various levels of facilities that they offer. Let's zoom in. More than 500 of them spread across the city. This is how well the city of Kiev is prepared. We set out to inspect one such bomb shelter. This is 83 Mezeriska Street. The Kiev City Council is sprucing up a bomb shelter here from the 1950s. This is now critical security infrastructure for the government of Ukraine. The official in charge takes us down a flight of stairs. A door similar to the kind you'll find on submarines greets us. Behind it lies the bunker, a bit like a cave with machines. The ceiling is low, it's dank and musty, but stocked with everything you would need in an emergency. Batteries for power, running water, telephones and sewage lines, chairs, beds, bathrooms. Inside one of the chambers is a massive piece of equipment, ready to pump oxygen if needed. In the event of an attack, as you can see, there are these pipes, and this is equipped with the oxygen supply, and this is one such supply chamber. If you go in, you see the pipes. This is well built, and they switch on these knobs here for oxygen to be supplied for the people who are inside this shelter in the event of a nuclear attack. Why does this bunker need oxygen? The answer lies on the walls. There are instructions everywhere, a survival guide for war. These bunkers are designed to protect against bombs of all kinds, biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons. There are a lot of posters on the walls. These are all from the 80s. This one shows what needs to be done in the event of a nuclear attack. You see clear diagrams. This is written in Russian, but it gives a detailed description of what are the steps to be followed in the event of a nuclear attack. And there are lots of such informative posters on the walls here. In the event of a chemical or a nuclear attack, they have a special stockpile of gear here, and they gave us access to one such box. Let me show you what it has. Here you go. It has these special masks. I've got one of them out, and this has gas supply, I believe. I'll try and wear it and show you how this works. And this is how it's going to look. I'm not going to keep it on for very long because it's very uncomfortable. But I'll just show you how it works. So I wear this mask, and then I have this device which is supposed to help me figure out how much radiation there is. So one person from this bomb shelter goes up wearing this mask, and you go up and you switch this thing on, and this is going to detect the radiation or chemical levels in the atmosphere to determine how safe it is for others to step out. These shelters will be key to Kiev's survival in the event of an attack. The government has posted an interactive map online with 5,000 official locations where residents can hide. More than 500 of these are from the Cold War era with built-in facilities where you can survive for days on end. The remaining 4,500 shelters include basements, underground parking lots and passageways, also Kiev's 47 metro stations. In case of an attack, an alarm will be sounded across the city. Sound signals like sirens and beeps will be transmitted, a message would be played out with instructions, and that's the time when Ukrainians must head to the bomb shelters. This one can house at least 150 people, we are told.
This bomb shelter was built in the 1950s, and it can accommodate at least 150 people.
This shelter, we are told, was built in the 1950s, and you see a lot of those old documents here. This is all in Russian or Ukrainian, and it's hard to tell what it says, but we are told that this is all the details that they have, all of these files that you see. Then you have a first aid box. I'm not sure I can open it. It has some very basic medicines, clearly not enough for 150 people, as the caretakers of the shelter say that this place can accommodate. This is old. You have a radio here. It was built in the 1950s, and I want to show you something very interesting that I just came across. Very old phones. The line is dead. This one's not working either, but interesting, relics of the past. And some numbers, I believe these are emergency numbers. So they have everything in place in case of an emergency. I'm not sure what the food supplies are going to look like. You have some basic furniture, mostly chairs, some beds, a few washrooms on that side of the building. Very basic setup, but we're talking about emergencies, of course, and not five-star accommodation. This bunker is not the only one that needs some upgrades. The government has released an assessment. It said 20% of the shelters in Kiev were not fit for service. Several shelters are occupied by stores, restaurants, and salons. A couple of weeks ago, a lawmaker assessed a bomb shelter near her home. It turned out to be a strip club. Authorities in Kiev are working overtime to close the gap. Last month, they began inspecting and upgrading all bomb shelters. Kiev's mayor has declared that the city's subway system will be used as a bunker if needed. The government of Ukraine is leaving nothing to chance. Amid dire intelligence warnings that Kiev could be captured within 48 to 72 hours of an attack, these bomb shelters will be the difference between life and death for the 2.8 million residents of Kiev. With the WION team, this is Palki Sharma Upadhyay from the world's most tense capital.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has reshuffled some of his ministers in an attempt to see off a leadership challenge. He had pledged to his Conservative MPs that he would reset his premiership in response to their concerns. After appointing new hires to his team in number 10, the Prime Minister's also reshuffled his so-called whips operation. That is the team of lawmakers who enforce discipline in the Conservative Party. The Chief Whip, Mark Spencer, has been replaced by Chris Heaton-Harris. He is a close ally of Boris Johnson and had been working behind the scenes to shore up support among lawmakers. Mark Spencer becomes the leader of the House of Commons. Jacob Rees-Mogg has been appointed Minister for Brexit Opportunities and Government Efficiency. Several Conservative lawmakers, as well as opposition leaders, have demanded the Prime Minister step down over parties in and around Downing Street. The oppositions also accused him of misleading Parliament. And in a few minutes from now, Boris Johnson will be taking questions at the House of Commons in his weekly Prime Minister's Questions session.
I thank my right honourable friend, and he...
Retired Pope Benedict XVI has asked for forgiveness for his handling of the Church's sex abuse cases. The 94-year-old says errors occurred when he was Archbishop of Munich. His lawyers argue he was not directly to blame. This after a German investigation detailed abuse cases in the Archdiocese from 1945 to 2019. The investigation accuses Pope Benedict of knowingly failing to stop child sex abuse when he was Archbishop between 1977 and 1982. The Vatican has issued a letter from Pope Benedict and a 3-page addendum following the report.
Nel lavoro gigantesco.
In all my meetings, especially during my many apostolic journeys with victims of sexual abuse by priests, I have seen at first hand the effects of a most grievous fault. And I have come to understand that we ourselves are drawn into this grievous fault whenever we neglect it or fail to confront it with the necessary decisiveness and responsibility, as too often happened and continues to happen. As in those meetings, once again I can only express to all the victims of sexual abuse my profound shame, my deep sorrow, and my heartfelt request for forgiveness.
The report found Pope Benedict had been informed of 4 cases of sexual abuse involving minors, but failed to act. He was the first pope in centuries to resign back in 2013. Truckers' protests have paralysed the Canadian capital, Ottawa, and show no sign of backing down. The demonstrations have spilled over to the US-Canada border and nearby areas, partially blocking the busiest border crossing between both countries.
The Ambassador Bridge, the busiest land crossing between the United States and Canada, remained partially shut on Tuesday after Canadian truckers blocked lanes the night before to protest their government's public health measures. The traffic chaos comes as protesters demanding an end to federal COVID-19 vaccine mandates for cross-border truckers paralyzed downtown streets of Canada's capital, Ottawa, while upending residents' daily lives with reports of near-incessant honking and harassment.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who returned to a heated session of Parliament Tuesday after isolating due to COVID, denounced the demonstrators' tactics.
We will continue to be there to support not just the citizens of Ottawa who are impacted by this protest, but also folks across the country, including hardworking truckers stuck at border crossings because of protests that are affecting and impacting and limiting their fellow citizens. So I call upon the Conservative Party to be consistent and in here and out there call to an end of these protests.
But interim Conservative leader Candice Bergen pushed the Prime Minister to end not the protest, but the pandemic restrictions.
Conservatives believe that living with COVID means opening up and ending the mandates, and I believe there are some Liberals who believe the same thing. So will the Prime Minister follow the science, end the lockdowns, and let Canada once again be the true North, strong and free?
The Right Honourable
Mr. Speaker, I'm extremely pleased to hear the Conservatives finally talking about following science. Unfortunately, we see Conservatives continuing to both call an end to the protests from in here and support them out there. They need to be more responsible leaders to get through this and to play less politics.
Outside Parliament, protesters occupying the streets are rallying against Trudeau's government. Since Sunday night, police have started slowly taking back control, seizing thousands of litres of fuel and removing a nearby oil tanker truck. Ottawa Deputy Police Chief Steve Bell told reporters on Tuesday that police have immobilized many of the heavy vehicles taking part in the blockade. He said about a quarter of the 418 protest trucks downtown have children in them, and police are concerned for their welfare in relation to cold, noise, carbon monoxide risks, and access to sanitation.
Well, on the other side of the world, some New Zealand truckers have drawn inspiration from those protests in Canada. Demonstrators in New Zealand are out with their trucks and camper vans, demanding an end to vaccine and mask and other COVID mandates. The convoy converged outside Parliament ahead of Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's first speech of the year. Protesters are calling for an end to the COVID restrictions that have been in place in New Zealand for nearly 2 years. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says protesters don't represent the majority.
I think it would be wrong to, in any way, characterise what we've seen outside as a representation of the majority. The majority of New Zealanders have done everything they can to keep one another safe.
New Zealanders have been under some of the most stringent COVID-19 border restrictions in the world since the beginning of the pandemic. Last week, the government extended some of those border restrictions until October. New Zealand will begin opening borders in a phased manner.
I am here today to protest against the mandates, as I lost my job due to the mandates and I absolutely love that job. Currently I'm trying to find a job, which is really, really hard at the moment for me, and I don't think people really know the sacrifices we've made, and that I know this is my choice that I chose not to get vaccinated, but the complications it's had on my family, losing friends, feeling isolated, even mental stuff suicide, and that is just really crazy. So I just love to spread a little bit of awareness and for people just to feel a little bit of compassion, because what we've gone through is just horrible. Police
have so far been refraining from making arrests. The country of 5 million people's recorded a total of 53 COVID-related deaths and 18,000 confirmed cases so far. Around 77% of the population is fully vaccinated. The Prime Minister says there will be no more lockdowns in the country.